Good morning. Our words of welcome are from Reverend Marilyn Sewell. Come into this circle of love and justice. Come into this community where we can dream and believe in those dreams. Come into this holy space where we remember who we are and how we want to live. Come now, let us worship together. This is a recorded service because this is the Sunday when Zoom was down pretty much worldwide. So we're glad that you have found this recording and are observing our service this morning. And I offer a special welcome to you if you are newly with us. We're honored by your curiosity and presence. For today's service, we have Kate Howell as service leader, Kat Barnett, Roy Haynes, Charlie Jacobs assisting, Michael Reason on piano, and then participating remotely, Linda Jessen singing, Monica Devine reading, and Richard Clark, Trudy Crippen, and Colleen Berry providing remote tech support. We do have some announcements which will be posted in my daily emails. A Monday women's discussion group will happen at 12 noon, Ahihic time. You can contact Catherine Luria or Pamela Cousinel for the discussion topic and the Zoom account. On Wednesday, we'll have our community circle, which all are welcome, 12 noon, Ahihic time. The link is shown, the meeting number as well, 330-333-1456. And on Thursday, we will have our women's coffee and chat, 12 noon, Ahihic time, same meeting number. Now let us light our chalice.
Our chalice lighting words are by Nancy Reed McKee. Our community knows no boundaries. We are not confined by the physical limits of walls, or for that matter, of what often binds us, restricts us, holds us back. We are freer than we know when we release ourselves and each other from expectations of what is needed for true community. We are here together in space. I see you, I hear you, I love you, and I light this chalice, a beacon of this community, holding us all together, here, now. If you have a chalice, please go ahead and light it. You can image on your camera, raise your hand in chat, and we'll enable your camera. You can't do that today. And show you lighting or holding your chalice. Now let's sing. This life in celebration for the life that we share.
Our hymn is number 346. Come Sing a Song with Me. It was written by Carolyn McDade, who also wrote that very familiar UU hymn, Spirit of Life.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love that grows in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love that grows in the winter time. Come walk in rain Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when home is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love that grows in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when home is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love that grows in the winter time.
This is Kat Barnett, filling in for Monica, who was to be with us remotely. Um, this is by the author Arundhati Roy. What is this thing that has happened to us? It's a virus, yes. In and of itself, it holds no moral brief. But it is definitely more than a virus. Some believe it's God's way of bringing us to our senses. Others that it's a Chinese conspiracy to take over the world. Whatever it is, coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normalcy, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normalcy. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dread ideas, our dread rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it.
One of the ways I make sense of the world is through metaphors, images, objects that help us understand more complicated concepts. Concepts like SARS-CoV-2 and this pandemic. We each have to find our own metaphors, our own images for how this pandemic works and how it plays out. We've probably seen a sketch like this one explaining how each person that's infected can go on to affect some number of other people. With COVID-19, the basic reproduction number is somewhere around 3, at least in situations without social distancing or other preventative measures. But what does this mean? Strangely, my metaphor is a nuclear power plant. Yes, I'm a sick puppy. But when I finally read and understood the epidemiology behind this pandemic, I realized that this pandemic is just like a nuclear power plant. The reason nuclear power can be so dangerous is that the nature of uranium in a plant is to fission, and each atom is able to fission and cause 3 other atoms to fission, and so on. 3, 9, 27, 81 in the exponential pattern of increase that we're now familiar with. It's only by inserting control rods that this fission can be brought to bear, either shut down completely or allowed to run at a dull roar producing power. The control rods get this growth number down to 1 or below. So in the same way, all the things we're doing, social distancing, masks, contact tracing, all these are in effect control rods in the pandemic, tamping down the exponential growth, trying to bring it under 1. And the challenge of epidemiology and of political leadership is to get the growth below 1, but without irreparably damaging society, the economy at the same time. And strange that that metaphor is, it gives me comfort, for this is a resolvable problem. It may take time, but the pandemic can be resolved even if we don't ever get a vaccine. And so when I see various predictions of how this is going to play out, first I see whether I can trust the source. And then I sanity check the model. So when I saw the New York Times article last week suggesting that the pandemic could continue for a long time, I had to put aside false hope and pay attention. Absent some miracle vaccine or cure, we should expect the pandemic to continue. Whatever social distancing is, whenever it's relaxed, the epidemic may flare up. And when the medical system is overwhelmed, authorities will be forced to reinstate social distancing protocols. There may be multiple cycles of this differing in different locales. Perhaps this virus is less, virulent in the summertime, and perhaps we can build up more hospital capacity. This graph suggests that there will be peaks and hotspots, but maybe more spread out than the previous one. Maybe times of lockdown will be fewer and less long. It's hard to fathom data like this. To think we may have a way to live in confinement for time measured in years rather than months throws water on all hope. And yet, the other thing that has brought me comfort in this time is reading historical accounts about past epidemics, the Spanish flu, polio, HIV/AIDS, as well as earlier, even more horrific pandemics like the Black Plague in Europe or smallpox in America. I remind myself that most of these pandemics either killed more people or left people disfigured or disabled for life. I remind myself that for many of these, no vaccine was ever developed, that the diseases were just managed, and in the case of HIV/AIDS are still being managed. These historical accounts allow us to calibrate this pandemic against past events, to understand how people responded or reacted well or poorly, and fathom how they came to be out on the other side. These accounts allow us to find the right balance of optimism and pragmatism as we continue through this in-between time, this time of pandemic. Our next reading is "We Will Not Go Back to Normal."
Our second reading is by activist Sonia Renee Taylor. We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature.
So a friend sent me this quote as a WhatsApp message, probably from Facebook. I love the quote, and I told him I wanted to use it for this service. It was attributed to Brené Brown, a writer and researcher who I also love. Yet I knew I'd have to verify the source. And sure enough, the quote was not written by Brown. She said so. In her own Twitter account, she said she'd seen it circulating and she wanted the actual writer to be attributed. It took her a little research to find the original author, Sonia Renee Taylor. Taylor is a Black, queer, body-positive activist. I just hope that the misattribution was not a conscious attempt by someone at whitewashing the quote, or het washing, or thin washing for that matter. That statement that Brown made, that Taylor made, is both a hope and a promise, a commitment to a hope that we all can help materialize. that the world of aftertime will be a world where we rebuild the economic systems of before time into something new. A new system that honors the contribution of all people, whatever they can offer. A new system that recognizes that once we have a basic level of income and income security, authentic joy in life comes not from making more money, but from doing things that people appreciate and are grateful for. That in aftertime, all activities are valued, from raising children, to making furniture, to writing poetry, to being a grandparent. That in aftertime, we would acknowledge that healthcare is a basic right, not something you earn by snagging a job with the right employer. That we would recognize that there are intrinsic values that are both unpriceable and priceless, such as a clear blue sky, clean water, open green spaces, and climate stability. That more fundamentally, we would realize that in aftertime, that we are part of nature, interwoven, not separate and somehow above nature. Now, this may seem like a whole lot of magical thinking, but I'm hopeful that at a more fundamental level, most of us, maybe even nearly all of us, nearly all of humanity may be developing a degree of spiritual maturity from this experience of pandemic. I mean, look, my generation, and I'm talking baby boomers here in general and younger generations, we have not been tested in the same way that previous generations have been tested. This pandemic is burdening all of us. Some are out of work, trying to piece together what scraps they can from the gig economy and from the thin offerings of charity groups and generous people. Others still work, but live in fear of infection. Others with already weakened bodies face a higher risk of death. Most of us are holed up, isolating, trying to make sense of this stretch of time and an uncertain future. But I think of my parents who lived through the Great Depression and a world war. When I think of my dad who went off to war, uncertain of return, and my mom working as an infectious disease nurse in tuberculosis wards, I realized that the level of sacrifice was much more enormous than what we face today. The sacrifice of that era led to a kind of spiritual growth for many who went through those times. After the Second World War, after that war ended, there was a huge resurgence of religion in the United States, especially in the so-called mainline religions. I think this played out in Canada and other places too. These denominations had become relatively liberal, or at least mainstream, and gladly shouldered their responsibility to make the world better. Unitarian Universalism was part of that wave. But the generations that followed, if they were religious at all, tended towards more self-centered religions. Many became evangelicals, focused on saving their own souls. Others adopting conservative religions to justify their own shadows of greed, racism, individualism, and xenophobia. Prosperity gospel, that idea that godly people are rewarded with riches, became popular. Others abandoned organized religion altogether, seeking personal spiritual growth through retreats and classes and gurus. For most of these people, the focus was on individuality rather than the hard work of forming and keeping community. The pandemic has put us in a spot. We are realizing a real kind of aloneness now. We are reflecting on how collectively we failed to come together to vanquish this virus early. We are realizing how messed up normal was. I think this creates a possibility for spiritual growth and maturity among many. I believe that such maturity will lead people to want to create a better world. I believe that as mature people, we will want to work together, realizing the cost of aloneness and knowing that together in community, we are wiser, more compassionate, and more capable than alone. May the aftertime we imagine be realized. a world rich in community and connection, where everyone is included and valued, and our interconnection with the whole earth is cherished. Blessed be.
Thank you for a very positive message. It is now time for us to extinguish our chalice. Let us extinguish our chalices with these words, which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world. And now for our postlude.
I can show you the world, shining, shimmering, splendid. Tell me, princess, now when did you last let your heart decide? I can open your eyes, take you wonder by wonder, over, sideways, and under on a magic carpet ride. Oh, new world, a new fantastic point of view. No one to tell us no, or where to go, or say we're only dreaming. Oh, new world, a dazzling place I never knew. But when I'm way up here, it's crystal clear that now I'm in a whole new world with you. Unbelievable sights, indescribable feeling, soaring, tumbling, freewheeling through an endless diamond sky. A whole new world, 100,000 things begin. I'm like a shooting star, I've come so far, I can't go back, I'm in a whole new world, with new horizons to pursue. I'll chase them anywhere, there's time to spare. Let me share this whole new world with you.
Someday this pandemic will end. Maybe we imagine the aftertime as a possibility for creating a better world than what we had in Beforetime. And together in community, may we go and make that imagination into reality. Blessed be.